Go for it.
So I have a concept of racism that is radically different from what most
Hmm.
people talk about. I see it as economics.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is because when you're dealing with a feudal society, any trade with other areas and any exposure to other races is extremely limited. In fact, it might
Right.
not exist at all. For
Sure.
thousands of years, East traded with West, but no Easterner ever made it all the way to the West, and no Westerner made it all the way to the East until Marco Polo,
Yes.
who's historically confirmed to be one of the first from the West to the East. And I'm sure that there was one or two the other way, but the point is that they were rare. They were
Hmm.
very, respected as almost like ambassadors of another culture. They
Correct.
were never treated as somebody to be derided, as somebody to be discriminated against because of their race.
Sure.
They were seen as magnificent examples of these wonderful people who we can learn from and get all kinds of valuable trade deals with. Okay, so then all of a sudden, there's the 19th century and there's racism rearing its ugly head. But why is
Hmm.
that? Well, that's because the percentage has changed. Instead of
Right.
1/10 of 1%, we now have large population shifts. It could
Hmm.
be because of immigration.
Sure.
It could be because of labor.
Sure.
In other words, we need somebody to grow our cotton and our tobacco.
That's
So
right.
we're going to go and get somebody and put them on ships, and it could be they could be from Africa. And now, instead of having a an honored African emissary,
Hmm.
we have slaves.
Yep.
Well, that's the economic basis of racism right there, isn't it? They're working
Correct.
for us. We're exploiting them. They're no longer somebody representing their culture and having magnificent trading opportunities thereby. No, we are using them and they are subservient to us, and it's a monetary financial relationship.
Correct.
Well, what the WF is going on? Well, I'll tell you what the WF is going on. If black people had the mansions, the pools, and the Rolls Royces,
Right.
we don't want to be black. And if Asian people, and to a certain extent these days they are, well, they racist Westerners used to call it the yellow skinned race.
Mm.
If they
Right.
suddenly became wealthier and
Right.
more powerful than us, then we might have to open up our elite neighborhoods and sell them mansions
Sure.
and cars, and we might actually have to teach their children and allow them to invest in our real estate
Right.
and our companies and our factories. And then what kind of racism would that be? That would be a master servant relationship in reverse.
Correct.
And that's all it is. There is no such thing as racism. There's only rivalry. There's only envy. There's only wealth and power.
Correct.
Now, how do you feel as an immigrant to this country compared to, as you very well know, the history of immigration to Canada, specifically BC, where the first Chinese came here to build the railroads and give
That's
their
right.
lives blasting tunnels through the Rocky Mountains and made $1 a day.
Right.
Now, that's no longer the case, is it?
Hmm.
No, since the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, we've had immigration of people with wealth, with people with industry, building up the economy. And now in my city here of Vancouver, where you also live, we have approximately 50% traditional Canadians and 50%
Right.
immigrants, mostly from Asia. And,
Sure.
and for particularly the Han Chinese, might be about 40%. Well, my
Right.
is now what is the racism part? Well, it's back to money and power, isn't it?
Correct. It has always been, in my opinion, it has always been associated to wealth and power.
Yes.
That's where racism comes along. Okay, historically speaking, back in the feudalistic society,
Mm-hmm.
your lords basically controls and owns everything.
Yes.
Okay, it is of no difference. Me personally, yes, the way I understand it, that even all as far back as the most recent, say,
Yes.
the mighty Royal British Navy, who conquered the seven seas and took on a lot of colonies,
Yes.
new world colonies, from the Caribbeans to the East
The
India in
sun
Asia.
never
Or the
sets.
Dutch took the Indonesia and things like that. It's all
Correct.
about power and control.
Yes.
Okay, once they took on that, then of course the relationship can be very hard,
Mm-hmm.
very rough, because the ruler wants to have full control over the situations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they look at all those people who serves them under the colony as inferior,
And I want to
as their
focus on that.
subservient.
Excuse me for stopping for 1 microsecond here, but I want to focus on that word ruler. Because the
Ruler.
common people don't have that
Right.
feeling. The common people
Correct.
of country A don't want to imprison or, enslave the common people of country B. It's the rulers. It's the
That's right.
rulers who do, because the rulers are always in constant competition with other rulers, each other,
Hmm.
in other words, or with other nations that they can exploit to gain an advantage economically, to keep themselves in
Sure.
power and luxury and wealth. And they do that through exploitation of whenever they can. If they can't do it with their own people, or
Right.
then they'll do it with anyone else that they can maintain military control over.
Sure.
So, what is racism today? Is it natural? Is it inbred? Is it no? It's artificial. It's been created due to
Imbalance
exploitation,
of
balance
power,
of power,
uneven
world
distribution of
trade,
wealth, so
distribution
on
of
and so
wealth,
forth.
and a classic example of that is the story of Pocahontas,
Mm.
which they made into a Disney movie. Now, as you know, she was a First Nations beauty, apparently,
Right.
who's
Right.
also a princess, in other words, a daughter of a chief
Right.
in the United States, in the area
Sure.
of Pennsylvania, I believe it was, but correct me
Mm.
if I'm wrong. And
Mm.
she fell in love with a British sailor who
Right.
arrived in very early era of European colonization of North America,
Sure.
and she learned English, and she
Right.
became an ambassador, in a sense, and a translator for her peoples,
Right.
with the Europeans who had arrived on her shores.
Right.
And there was a wonderful relationship there where they didn't fight with each other. They allowed the Westerners to build their own homes and grow their own foods, and
That's right.
she became so important that she came back to England and met the Queen.
Right.
At that time, I believe it was Queen Victoria in
Right.
the 1830s,
Yes.
and she was feted. She was dressed up as a princess in her the finest clothes, and met the best people, and was treated with unbelievable respect.
Sure.
Is that racism? I don't
No.
think so. So how come that relationship changed into the Trail of Tears, where the entire native populations of the West Coast areas had to march all the way on foot to Oklahoma,
Mm.
and most of them dying on the way? How could respect turn to genocide within 30 or 40 years? It has nothing to do with racism.
Correct.
It has to do with economic exploitation, deprivation. It has to do with people coming and looking for lands and taking it from those who can't defend themselves.
Sure.
It's nothing to do with color of skin. It's nothing to do with language. It's nothing to do with culture. It's economics 101, and that is the problem. Is the people who believe that if you're richer, you're better, and if you're
Right.
poorer, you deserve to be treated like shit. That is
That's
the
right.
problem, and that's racism.
That is indeed a form of racism. And that is still going on up at this day and
It
age.
is.
That's right.
Look around you. What do you see? People in Africa who are making $2 a day. Is
Right.
that because African people are lower than us?
No.
No. Are they is it because they're less intelligent than us? No.
Hell no.
Because they have a less sophisticated and less spiritual culture than us? Of course not. It's because we have hegemony. We have economic control over their imports and exports, and we force them into a position where they're in debt to the World Bank, and they have to export cash crops to pay the interest on that debt. And therefore they can't be self-sufficient and grow food on their farms. They have to grow flowers on their farms to fill the vases of us.
Right.
How disgusting.
Hmm.
How horrible. But that is the world that we live in. And that is the racist fundamentals. And that has
Do
to be
that.
stopped, and that has to be corrected. And I think we can do it. And I think that the way that we can do it is to destroy the current power structure of this planet, because that is where it comes from. It comes
Do
from
that.
the people who live off of oppression and exploitation.
Hmm.
The elite.
Hmm.
Stop.
Stop.